Welcome to Episode 8 in the Accident Theory series. So far, we have learned that for a causal investigation to be useful and for the investigator to be regarded as reliable, the investigation must be comprehensive, efficient, and unbiased. To prevent an investigation from closing prematurely, guidelines and best practices should be followed to ensure all relevant factors are examined. Additionally, we discovered that preconceptions can severely hinder an investigation. In today's episode, we are going to take a deeper dive into bias. Specifically, we are going to look at hindsight bias, fundamental attribution bias, self-serving bias, and selection bias. Bias has been a major topic throughout previous episodes of this series and is something that should be avoided in any type of investigation. However, bias is not limited to incident investigations. It can influence every decision we make in our daily lives. Bias can develop from past experiences that shape how we process information and make decisions. It can also stem from the beliefs or opinions of others, influencing how we perceive situations. In some cases, bias can escalate into more harmful ways of thinking, leading to stereotypes or prejudices against certain groups of people or specific viewpoints. A historical example of how bias can lead to discrimination occurred during World War II in Canada. The Canadian government forcibly relocated people of Japanese descent into internment camps, stripping them of their property and belongings. The media's portrayal of Japanese immigrants fueled public distrust and hostility. Understanding the cause of an incident is much easier after the event has already occurred. Essentially, all investigations rely on hindsight, as the outcome is already known. This has significant implications for how an investigator interprets events, as those involved in the incident and those investigating it often view information differently. When an incident occurs, those involved tend to remember more details about what happened from the point of the incident onward, but often struggle to recall what happened before the event. This is because pre-incident events may not have seemed important at the time, making them harder to retrieve from memory. Consequently, investigators must determine which information is genuine and based on actual observations, and which details might be false memories shaped by biases or assumptions about what must have occurred based on the incident's outcome. Relying solely on the first available explanation can lead to a premature close, preventing a thorough analysis. Once an investigator finishes collecting data, they often have more information than was available at the time of the incident. With additional time to evaluate, interpret, and reflect, they may unknowingly apply hindsight bias, leading them to overestimate what could have been done differently in that situation. This can result in unfairly assigning fault to an individual who acted differently than what is now seen as the correct response. It is easy to become fixated on how an incident could have or should have been prevented, leading to an over-reliance on counterfactual thinking. This type of biased reasoning not only provides a quick explanation for the incident, but also reinforces the idea that the event was unusual and not a failure of the system or process itself. When a system is assumed to be safe, it becomes easier to blame the individual and classify the event as human error. This judgmental mindset, driven by hindsight bias, results in conclusions that suggest a worker failed to recognize, comply, operate safely, or react appropriately. However, these judgments are based on knowledge that was only available after the fact, not the conditions present at the time of the incident. When opinions are predetermined, the investigation loses objectivity, leading to ineffective or even harmful interventions. Hindsight bias encourages the belief that a person should have and could have avoided the incident if only they had been more diligent, skilled, or attentive, even though this assumption only becomes obvious after the fact. Whenever an incident occurs, it is human nature to assign cause or fault to someone or something to create a sense of resolution. A proper causal investigation makes it nearly impossible to dismiss an incident as a random act of bad luck. However, how fault is initially determined can be distorted by fundamental attribution bias, also known as the self-other bias. This bias occurs when people explain the failure of others in terms of their actions, character traits, or personal shortcomings, but justify their own failures as the result of external circumstances beyond their control. Fundamental attribution bias allows a person to rationalize their own mistakes while holding others fully accountable for the same type of failure. For example, if a person is successful 99 times out of 100, they will explain the one failure in terms of what made that situation different from the others. However, if 99 people successfully complete a task, but one person fails, the fundamental attribution bias leads people to focus on what made that individual different, rather than considering whether circumstances played a role in the failure. Supervisors, investigators, and union representatives are all naturally inclined to evaluate a worker's accident by looking at how that worker differs from others, rather than first considering how that day's activities, the work environment, or specific circumstances may have influenced the event. This mindset is often referred to as the bad apple syndrome, where the focus is on removing problematic individuals or tightening procedures to prevent further incidents. However, the so-called bad apple may have been an ordinary worker placed in an unusually difficult situation that set them up for failure. An exception to the bad apple mindset occurs with tasks that appear trivial or straightforward. In these cases, people may blame themselves for an error, even if the design of a simple tool or system was flawed. While most people instinctively avoid taking blame due to personal preference and fundamental attribution error, they also do not want to appear incompetent. If a device or task seems simple, failure to use it correctly might make someone feel inadequate. As a result, instead of acknowledging a design flaw, they may conceal their mistake to preserve their image of competence. A cognitive bias is more than just a phenomenon of perception. Rather, it also describes the preferences of explanation, often for self-serving reasons. A common self-serving bias occurs when an investigator attempts to find one single root cause when an incident has occurred. Some people tend to cite the root cause as the ultimate object of an investigation, while others dismiss root cause as an illusion. From previous episodes in the Accident Theory series, we have determined that in many investigations, there is no true one root cause. Rather, there are multiple factors that can lead up to an incident. Finding one root cause is self-serving, as the investigator aims to complete the investigation so quickly that they are unaware or unwilling to accept any other factors that should be investigated. There is an old expression that states, "Never buy a car manufactured on a Friday afternoon." And the rationale for this phrase is that workers on the assembly line on Friday speed through their work, often missing proper checks and balances, in order to get home faster for the weekend. Speeding through work is self-serving, as the quality of the product will suffer because less quality control is taking place. An example of a self-serving bias in incident investigation would be for a supervisor to identify misbehavior rather than hazard as a cause. When reflecting on this statement, it does not align with being unbiased, as it is placing the blame on a human element rather than equipment or policy. This may happen because the investigator must produce a report for what has occurred, and the upper management reading the report prefers to hear certain things. Blaming people seems to be the easiest and cheapest solution. People can be retrained, fired, reassigned, or replaced. This offers instant gratification and symbolic political expediency. It looks like action, and it makes a statement that the system as such is fine, and the organization is tough on those who do not work properly. Finding a quick and singular root cause allows for an investigator to close a report as quickly as possible and move on to another project. It is easy to conclude that something happened due to root causes such as personal factors, poor motivation, lack of skill, job factors, health and psychological problems, or a worker just being bad at their job. These root causes are straightforward and easily contemplated by anyone reading the incident report. but they truly do not capture every facet of an investigation, and any remedies determined by the investigation will not truly correct the issue. Selection bias occurs when the participants or data chosen for a study do not accurately represent the larger population intended to be analyzed, leading to results that are systematically skewed. This bias often emerges when the selection process favors certain individuals or groups, either consciously or unconsciously, causing an over or under representation of specific characteristics in the sample. In the field of incident investigation, selection bias can occur when an investigator chooses to only interview certain individuals or makes observations of a work process only completed by certain individuals. This causes the interpretation of the observations to be skewed, as it does not show a true sample of the different types of workers completing a task. For example, if we were investigating effectiveness of a new medication for managing high blood pressure, and we only recruited participants from a high-end private clinic, the sample might consist predominantly of individuals who are wealthier and have better access to health care. These participants may adhere more strictly to treatment regimens, have better overall health, and engage in healthier lifestyle practices compared to the general population. As a result, the study might overestimate the medication's effectiveness because it doesn't account for those with less access to health care who might have different adherence patterns and health outcomes. In this scenario, the selection bias arises from the non-random selection of participants, which excludes a significant portion of the population that might respond differently to the treatment. Consequently, the findings would be less generalizable to the broader population, potentially leading to misguided conclusions about the medication's effectiveness in real-world settings. To avoid selection bias, researchers must strive to use random, representative sampling methods that ensure all segments of the target population are adequately represented in the study. There are many types of biases, and although we have only discussed 4 of them in this episode, there are many more. Find another type of bias that we did not talk about, and write a short description in this episode's group chat or in the comments section if you are following on social media. In Episode 8, we took a deeper dive into bias. Biases do not just affect incident investigation. Rather, they can affect every type of decision that is encountered throughout our lives. A bias can lead to more severe ways of thinking, such as creating a stereotype or prejudice towards certain groups of people or certain ways of thinking. When an investigator has finished collecting data about an incident, there is always more information available compared to what was there at the time of the incident. Simply basing a conclusion on the first reason that something must have occurred is a common cause of a premature close. Essentially, all investigations are performed in hindsight because the outcome of the event is already known. How fault is initially determined can be manipulated by fundamental attribution, otherwise known as the self-other bias. Self-serving bias occurs when an investigator attempts to find one single root cause when an incident has occurred. Selection bias occurs when the participants or data chosen for a study do not accurately represent the larger population intended to be analyzed, leading to results that are systematically skewed. A cognitive bias is more than just a phenomenon of perception. Rather, it also describes the preferences of explanation, often for self-serving reasons. COHSI provides its students with a multiple-choice quiz at the end of each episode, which can be used as practice material for the content that has been covered. A free version of the quiz can be accessed by anyone following our content on social media by using the QR code shown on the screen. If you are a COHSI student, please complete the discussion board topics found throughout this unit, as well as the episode quiz. Both of these tasks can be found under their appropriate tabs in your learning portal. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to your course instructor. Thank you for watching and have a safe day.